Hey, what is going on, guys? Max Settings here, and welcome back to another review. In today's review, we are going to be taking a look at two headphones, today being the Audeze LCD-X and the Audeze LCD-MX4. Now, both these headphones were provided for review by Audeze, so big thanks to them for sending these out for review. I'm not paid by them or influenced by them in any way to say anything about these, and I will be returning them to them when I am done with this video. So once again, big thanks for sending these to me for review. And without any more delay, let's hop on into the video. So the reason I asked Audeze for these two headphones is because I already had the LCD-GX from last video on loan from headphones.com, and I wanted to make a comparison video of all three of the open back Audeze LCD headphones that use the LCD-X diaphragm. All three of these headphones use the same 20 ohm diaphragm in trace, and they just differ in terms of magnets and phaser in terms of the GX as well as chassis. So I thought this would be a very interesting comparison to compare all the open headphones that use this diaphragm. Now there also is still the LCD-XC that uses this diaphragm, but it's closed back, so we are just going to be doing the open back models today. So we're not going to talk about the LCD-GX today. This was the last review that went up right before this one, so if you want to know about the GX, please go watch that one first and then come back to this one. But we will be talking about it a little bit in the comparison segment of this video. So let's hop on into the specs of the LCD-X and the LCD-MX4. Now the LCD-X pricing is weird. The standard one with the case is $1,699, so $1,700. However, they offer what's known as the Creator's Package, which is what this one was. That does not include the hard shell carrying case, and for that they sell it for $1,200. But you can buy the case for, I think, $120 on their site, so for $1,320 you can get the same thing they charge $1,700 for. I have no idea why Audeze does this, but we'll just say it's a $1,200 headphone because it really is. But anyway, it is a $1,200 open back planar magnetic headphone with a 20 ohm impedance, a sensitivity of 103 dB a milliwatt, and a weight of 635 grams. However, on my particular LCD-X, I weighed it in at 695 grams, which is quite a bit more than Audeze's listed spec and is pushing up into LCD-4 weight territory, so that is quite interesting. Now moving on to the LCD-MX4, it is a $3,000 open back planar magnetic headphone with an impedance of 20 ohms, a sensitivity of 105 dB a milliwatt, and a weight of 600 grams, but mine was measured at 615 grams. Now, as for what these headphones are, the LCD-X came out much before the GX and the MX4 did. And of note, this is the newer, like late 2019, but I'm just going to call it the 2020 revision of the LCD-X. And for all the, I guess, normal non-magnesium Audeze headphones now, they are all switching over to this screen material underneath the grill, which looks quite good, like the 2, the 3, the 4, the X. All the ones that use the traditional Audeze chassis are all using that screen material for the under the grills now for the, I'm just going to call it the 2020 revision, which I quite like. It looks very nice. But yeah, so the LCD-X came out, I believe, in 2014, so it's a much older headphone than the other two. Now, the LCD-MX4 is the LCD-X diaphragm in the magnesium chassis with the LCD-4's magnets, and this one is fully double-sided with the phase array. So this is the full LCD-4 magnets, and as I mentioned in the GX review, it is this but single-sided with no phaser. So this is basically, I guess technically it would be like the LCD-4Z but with the LCD-X diaphragm, but it's the LCD-X diaphragm, magnesium chassis, LCD-4 magnets. So that is what these three headphones are. Now, as for build, the LCD-X is the more traditional Audeze build, but the cups are metal, not wood, like the 2, the 3, and the 4 are. Like I showed before, mesh grills, metal yokes, standard Audeze suspension headband. leather pads on this one, real leather pads that are memory foam. Mini 4-pin connectors, and very standard Audeze build through and through. The LCD-MX4, take everything I said about the LCD-GX, give it real leather pads and the carbon fiber headband. So this is the magnesium chassis. It saves a lot of weight. And just of note, this particular one is an Audeze demo unit, so I guess it's probably been to a lot of shows and around. So this one is, the screws are loose or something, and it's really floppy. But I'm just going to chalk that up to this one being around the block quite a bit. So if it starts flopping around on the table, that's why, because it's a little bit loose. Now, as for comfort, once again, standard Audeze fare. The MX4 is more comfortable than the X, and the GX is more comfortable than the MX4, because all in all, basically same pads, although protein leather, and leather, but same pads, more or less same headband. The comfort is going to be basically the same, but it just gets more comfortable with less weight. But once again, I am quite a fan of the Audeze comfort, even on the LCD4. It does not bother me at all. But if you're sensitive to weight, I can definitely see the X and the MX4 being a little bit much for you, but the GX is fairly light, as mentioned in the last video. Now, as for power requirements, these two are also not hard to drive. In fact, they're easier to drive than the LCD-GX. The sensitivity gets higher as you go up. So this is like 100, 103, and 105 dB a milliwatt with the same impedance. So they get progressively easier to drive as you move up the range here, but none of them are very hard to drive, so you should not have any problem driving any of them. And then as for included accessories, with the MX4, you do get the Audeze Pelican case that I showed in the GX review. I'm not going to show it again. All three of them have the same cable, but once again, the GX has the mic cable. The X does not include the case with the creators package, as I mentioned before, but you can get it, just buy it for $120 extra. Don't buy the $1,700 version. All right, now moving on into the sound of the LCD-X and the LCD-MX4. So let's go ahead and start with the LCD-X. Now, starting off with the frequency response, the LCD-X has flat bass down to 20 Hertz, once again, as you expect from an Audeze headphone. It has a little bit of that 1.5K Audeze shout of, I'd say, about 2 to 3 dB. After that, it starts rolling off at around 2K, and it dips down to its lowest point at around 4.5K. Now, please note that that 4.5K is way down there. This one rolls off super, super hard. I think this one rolls off in the mids even more than that LCD3 that I said rolled off like some of the most I've ever heard. This one drops off to like 9, 10 dB down at 4.5K. It is way, way recessed. After that, there is like a weird 5K-ish peak on this particular one that seems like it comes back up like 4 to 5 dB and then just kind of drops back off again. And then after that, the treble starts coming back up for a 9K peak that is fairly sharp. It's not more so than most other Audezes, but after coming off such a wide mid canyon, the treble on this was bothering me. There was like a weird peakiness. I think it's that 5K, and then that 9K seems more exaggerated because of how much the mids roll off with the LCD-X. And then really curiously, when I was going through Sine Sweep, I was trying to figure out like where's this really weird upper treble that's bothering me. And I found it at 14.5K. 14.5K on this LCD, this particular LCD-X is really piercing. It has a really sharp 14.5K peak that seems to go up like 3 or 4 dB, which is very interesting. This thing has a lot of air, and it kind of bothers me. It's really, really airy and kind of splashy above 10K. So that is the FR of the LCD-X. Okay, so now moving on to the LCD-MX4. Now, the LCD-MX4, once again, flat bass down to 20 Hertz. This reminds me a little bit more of like LCD2 in FR from memory. A little bit of that 1.5K shout of maybe like 2 to 3 dB, rolls off, lowest point at about 4.5K, and that's about 6 or 7 dB down. After that, nothing too funky, and the treble comes back up to like that 9K Audeze peak. That's right about in line with the lower mids. The MX4 is much more regular Audeze FR. This is like fairly similar to the 2 from my memory. So this one is not that weird, but the LCD-X FR is much weirder. Okay, so now let's talk about detail. So the LCD-X for $1,200 I think is decently detailed. I definitely think it's roughly in line with what the LCD3 is. However, this has got some other weird stuff that we're going to talk about once we get through all the other categories. The MX4 is more detailed than the LCD-X is, but it's very marginal. It's only slightly more resolving than the LCD-X is. Now, as for dynamics, the LCD-X is decently punchy in terms of slam and impact. And then overall microdynamics are good and microdynamics are okay. Got a little bit of planar compression. It's not the most dynamic headphone that I've ever heard. And then the MX4 is ever so slightly more impactful and I think has ever so slightly better macro and microdynamics. Now, as for timbre, both are plasticky. However, the LCD-X sounds really, really off to me because the mids are just so gone on this particular unit, and there's that weird treble peaks and that like 5K mid peak on the LCD-X that is bothering me. So the timbre on this one sounds super, super off with most stuff, in my opinion. Now, as for soundstage, both of these are fairly typical Audeze soundstage. Both sound quite wide. Now, in terms of soundstage, I think this is where I'm going to talk about this. This LCD-X has a weird cuppiness kind of sound with it. It has like this weird echoey reverb cuppy sound that is very strange. I've never heard it on any other Audeze headphones. It almost sounds like that weird echoey like closeback kind of thing, but it's still wide, and I have no idea what is causing it. It's a very, very strange sound on the LCD-X here, but it's still a wide headphone, and so is this. Imaging on them is both fairly decent, nothing to write home about, but it images well enough. So that is the overall sound on the LCD-X and the LCD-MX4. Okay, so now moving on into comparisons here. So now this is where we will pull the GX into the ring. The GX has the best FR of the three. And like I mentioned, I think it has the best FR of any full-sized Audeze headphone. The LCD-X, this particular unit, is really, really off in terms of frequency response. And I've mentioned before that the LCD-X is known for crazy unit variance, and it really is. Supposedly it's been improved in the last couple years. It's not like the old pre-2016 days as much anymore, but I've heard better LCD-Xs than this particular one. This one is very, very off sounding. Now, as for detail, I do think the detail improves as you go up in price, and I do think the dynamics and overall slam goes up as you move up the line, where the LCD-X is definitely more detailed and is much harder hitting and has, I think, better micro detail than the GX does. And the MX4 is also a improvement over the LCD-X. However, the difference between the X and the MX4 in terms of technicalities is not huge in my opinion. This just seems like a marginal upgrade over the LCD-X in terms of technicalities. Now the FR is better, but we'll just chalk that up to unit variance. Now both are definitely ahead of the GX in terms of detail and dynamics, but once again, best FR, best detail and dynamics, and this particular LCD-X just falls really flat to me. It just sounds super off. The technicalities hold up for its price point, but I just don't like how this particular one sounds. Now, as for pricing, once again, we have $899, $1,200, and $3,000. The MX4 is massively overpriced, in my opinion. Now, Audeze sold these brand new Black Friday 2018 for $1,500. And I think that's what it should be priced at. This thing at $1,500 seems like a fair ask to me. But $3,000, no. Do not pay $3,000 for an MX4 in my opinion. I know it's technically 33% more expensive, but the difference between the LCD MX4 and the full LCD4 is huge, huge, huge step up in detail and overall dynamics going from the MX4 to the 4. It is absolutely worth the stretch, the extra $1,000 over the MX4. So I think the LCD-X in terms of technicalities probably holds up for its price, but this particular one, the FR, is too off-putting to me. The MX4 is way too expensive. I think it should be about $1,500, and then I think it would be competitive for its price point if you like the Audeze, whatever the Audeze sound. But these two both really need EQ, in my opinion, to sound their best, where the GX does not. And me personally, if I had to pick one of these to listen to, price not being a factor, I'm going to take the GX over the X and the MX4 personally. This one, as I mentioned in my review of it, is my second favorite Audeze headphone behind the LCD4 because its FR is so much better than every other LCD headphone, and I'm willing to give up, some of the detail and the overall dynamics that the X and the MX4 have for having a much more normal FR. Now, if you EQ, then that changes a little bit, but I don't know if you can save this LCD-X with EQ. If it ever ends up in Metal 571's hands, I guess we will find out. But this one seems too far gone to me to fix with EQ. The MX4 is definitely fixable, but it's way too expensive. So if you can get one of these for $1,500 or less and you can EQ, then I think it's probably a decent pickup. But of the three, my recommendation is going to be just get the GX. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my review and comparisons of the LCD GX, the LCD-X, and the LCD MX4. Once again, the GX just really reigns supreme for me. I really like this thing. The LCD-X, if you had one with a better FR or you can really EQ, definitely holds up fairly well for a $1,200 price point. However, I think I'm personally going to take either the Borealis, the Aria, the Clear, or like an Aeolus or something over it. That's a little bit more my preference. But if you like that Audeze thing and you want to EQ and yours is not as messed up in the mids as this particular one, then I by all means go with it. The LCD MX4 is, don't pick one up for $3,000. Just go for the full 4. If you can get one, once again, for less than $15,000, then go ahead and pick one up. But anyway, links of where to buy these in the description below, as well as my Twitter, the ears graph comparing the three. But once again, do not take the ears graph too literally because it's really wrong for the GX and it's fairly wrong for the other two anyway. But anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the review. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.